What is the point of making an episode of a cartoon based around Halloween? Of course, the primary reason to do this is to capture more of an audience by tying the new episode of your show to the current holiday season. But even within that framework, one can still tell a good story based on Halloween. Let's take a look at the 3 SpongeBob episodes that take place on Halloween and ask ourselves how the writers crafted these Halloween episodes. Chapter 1. Scaredy Pants. SpongeBob's first Halloween special aired all the way back in its very first season. Unlike the other 2 episodes we will be discussing, this episode has a standard 11 minutes runtime. The episode revolves around SpongeBob's insecurity towards Halloween as the townspeople make fun of him for being easily scared, dubbing him SpongeBob Scaredy Pants. With the help of Patrick, SpongeBob makes himself round to fit into this ghost costume to try and scare everyone at the Krusty Krab by pretending to be the Flying Dutchman. The plan backfires so badly that it angers the real Flying Dutchman, who shows up to punish everyone at the Krusty Krab by stealing their souls, because SpongeBob's costume is just that insultingly unscary. I want to talk a little bit about the Flying Dutchman and how SpongeBob uses supernatural or science fiction elements in general. So SpongeBob is a show that is rooted mostly in regular reality. It's not a show that is explicitly about ghosts or aliens or superheroes, and plenty of episodes of the show operate within our standard understanding of reality. Well, beyond the whole talking sea creatures thing. However, in the universe of SpongeBob, supernatural and science fiction elements do exist and can be used if the story needs it. This is how SpongeBob can have episodes as mundane as something like The Chaperone, where SpongeBob takes Pearl to her prom, or something more high concept like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy or Shanghai. In Scaredy Pants, the Flying Dutchman represents the ultimate form of scary, and upon showing up, he shifts the social power balance of the scene. Before, it was the townspeople who scare SpongeBob, giving them power over him. Then, when SpongeBob scares the townspeople, he takes that power back. But when his trick gets revealed, the power goes back into the hands of the townspeople. But then the unexpected entrance of the Flying Dutchman takes all the power away and puts it into the hands of the Dutchman. And then, to flip all of this over on its head, when Dutchman removes the costume from SpongeBob, he runs off screaming at the sight of SpongeBob's brain, taking all of the power that the Dutchman just usurped in his entrance and transferring it over to SpongeBob, crowning him the scariest thing around and granting him the narrative victory he deserves. So in using a supernatural entity as the embodiment of the scariest thing around, and having even him be scared of what SpongeBob looks like, it communicates to the audience that SpongeBob himself is the scariest thing around, completing his character journey from the one being scared to the scarer. The lesson of the episode is about determination in a specific goal. In order for SpongeBob to get these townspeople to stop scaring him, he needs to step up and scare them back. And while his actual intended goal of scaring them with his ghost costume didn't work, it was because he attempted to scare them in the first place that he chose to have his head shaved down to his brain, which ended up unintentionally being the thing that scares everyone. Chapter 2. The Legend of Bikini Bottom. The first thing I think of when I think of Legend of Bikini Bottom is its stop-motion art style. SpongeBob first did a stop-motion special with It's a SpongeBob Christmas, which are reminiscent of the classic Rankin Bass Christmas specials. While I definitely associate stop-motion more with Christmas, the medium works with Halloween specials as well, as the heightened sense of reality that stop-motion uniquely portrays works perfectly with both Christmas and Halloween-aligned specials. Legend of Bikini Bottom has a similar conflict to Scaredy Pants in that SpongeBob gets too easily scared at Halloween time. But unlike Scaredy Pants, which was more about SpongeBob learning to be scary himself, Legend of Bikini Bottom is more about SpongeBob overcoming his fears. At the beginning of the episode, Patrick gives SpongeBob the advice to think of scary as funny, and the lesson of the episode is to not exchange one extreme for another. See, SpongeBob at first is afraid of everything, but then by acting like everything that's scary is funny, he is then afraid of nothing, which makes him ignore the actual real dangers that the Flying Dutchman poses later in the episode. Once again, the Dutchman is used as a way of representing the ultimate scary, and his version of being scary is framed as different and more dangerous than the more normal kinds of scary things that Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton create. This teaches the lesson that there are some things that are funny scary and others that are just scary scary. While the episode values the balance of acknowledging when things should be scary or not, SpongeBob still has an arc that revolves around being braver. At the beginning of the episode, he asks Patrick to hold his hand hand because he's afraid of Halloween, and later on, after he gets so scared his skeleton and body separate and run out of the Dutchman's ship, his skeleton and skin have a little exchange where they decide to go back and save their friends, ending off with this.
Will you hold my hand?
SpongeBob asking himself to hold his own hand symbolizes that he can now rely on himself and not be afraid. It's also cool that in Bikini Bottom we actually see the Flying Dutchman steal souls, something that was threatened in Scaredy Pants but never actually followed through on. And similarly to Scaredy Pants, SpongeBob defeats the Flying Dutchman by being even scarier than he is when Plankton tells Dutchman that the inside of SpongeBob's brain is the scariest place of all. Nice callback to the multiple times in the series where Plankton went into SpongeBob's brain. While the simplistic drawing sequence that shows the inside of SpongeBob's brain is absolutely hilarious, especially considering the fact that this wasn't a traditionally drawn episode, it also shows that scary things are not just limited to actual physical threats, but fears can also be about emotional things like your mother showing embarrassing baby pictures. I'm surprised to say this, but I think that Bikini Bottom succeeds even more as a Halloween special than Scaredy Pants does. Now, don't get me wrong, they're both great, but Bikini Bottom explores in a much deeper way the concept of how we should engage with things that are scary and focuses on actually overcoming being scared, whereas Scaredy Pants only focuses on learning how to scare others. Again, both are great stories, but this goes to show that SpongeBob writers are good at crafting Halloween episodes. But did they stick the landing with their next Halloween special? Chapter 3. The Haunted Bucket. The Haunted Bucket is, at the time of this recording, the most recent Halloween episode of SpongeBob, and the final one we'll be discussing in this video. I know there are other spooky SpongeBob episodes, even some that were released around Halloween, but for the purposes of this video, I'm more interested in talking about stories that actually take place on Halloween, and how it uses Halloween, the holiday, to tell its stories. So, Haunted Bucket revolves around SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward getting stuck in the Chum Bucket on Halloween night, after Squidward tricks SpongeBob and Patrick into staying at the Chum Bucket all night, you know, to get rid of them. But you may be asking, how does Squidward end up stuck with them?
Oh, I know who we can ask.
Yep, Patrick just pulls Squidward out of his pants. Okay, so my knee-jerk reaction to this was to think it was dumb, but when I thought about it for a bit, I actually think it kind of works. Because after all, Squidward deserves to get stuck here since he was the one who deceived them in the first place, and by having Patrick just suddenly make him appear, it's almost like the universe is punishing him in the most absurd way possible. This makes the story similar to Graveyard Shift, where in both stories Squidward tells a lie to try and get SpongeBob out of his hair, which ends up backfiring when the very thing that he tried to use to scare SpongeBob ends up scaring him too. But if you want to hear more about Graveyard Shift, check out my Nosferatu video. The Haunted Bucket then compounds on its story even more when Plankton and Karen try to scare their unwanted guests, which ends up backfiring on them when they release the actual real ghosts into the Chum Bucket. I did really enjoy the bit where all the different kinds of ghosts come out with Plankton explaining all the different kinds of burial grounds that the Chum Bucket is built on. The reason that all these fun, creative ghost designs work beyond their art direction is because them attacking our main characters is backed up by the foundation of the story itself. SpongeBob and Patrick were seeking something scary. Squidward lied about something scary for his own personal gain, and Plankton and Karen tried to scare others because, well, they like to bully others. So because all these characters were seeking out such things, they all end up reaping what they sow in the form of all these ghosts chasing them. Chapter 4. Why tell a Halloween story? A Halloween story should revolve around a character's relationship to what that holiday means to them. As a holiday, Halloween is about embracing the strange, the weird, and most importantly, the scary. I believe that Halloween is an important holiday in broader culture because it creates a socially acceptable space to embrace the quirkier parts of our imagination, and dedicates a certain time of the year to celebrating that. It's also about engaging with concepts we usually find scary and associating them with the fun and joy of a holiday. Really, Halloween is best represented through Patrick's lesson at the beginning of Bikini Bottom. Scary equals funny. So, because Halloween is fundamentally about taking things that one finds scary and turning them around into something fun, a good Halloween special is one that shows us a character who learns the very same lesson that the holiday teaches us. Of the 3 Halloween specials I talked about in this video, Legend of Bikini Bottom accomplishes this the best. It starts off with SpongeBob outright rejecting what Halloween means because of how afraid of it he is, and through his character journey, he learns to not only accept Halloween, but become braver as a person. Scaredy Pants also accomplishes this by having SpongeBob overcome his rejection of the Halloween holiday, represented by his fears, by him scaring everyone else. Haunted Bucket, while still being a pretty good episode, could have benefited from having Squidward, who seems to have the biggest arc in the episode, have more of a rejection of Halloween as a holiday that he would then have to overcome throughout the course of the episode. The story is still solid though. After all, Squidward did reject SpongeBob and Patrick at first, but then ended up having to spend Halloween with them anyway. But I think that the one thing that would have turned it from a good episode to a great episode would have been to have Squidward primarily reject Halloween as a holiday through rejecting SpongeBob and Patrick, rather than his rejection only being on SpongeBob and Patrick themselves. That would have upgraded it from an episode that takes place on Halloween to a proper Halloween episode. But all in all, SpongeBob has been consistently successful in crafting strong Halloween episodes due to the way it presents its characters, how it uses supernatural elements, and a strong understanding of what Halloween should be. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, I've got a Patreon and you can become a channel member. Also, make sure to check out my gaming channel. I just did a video where I compared the SpongeBob movie GBA game to the actual movie. There are some pretty shocking comparisons in there. You should really check it out.